Thank you to everyone who is picking up extra jobs today. Actually, I think very, very good for all of us. Keeps us strong. Well, speaking of strength, that's where my thoughts centered today. In Mishnah Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma asks, Ezehu Gibor? Who is strong? Who is an adult? Who is mature? Who is a spiritual warrior? Lots of ways to translate the word Gibor. Ben Zoma answers his own question. Who is strong, he says? Those who subdue their passions. As it is written, one who is slow to anger is better than the strong, and one whose temper is controlled is better than one who captures an entire city. That last from our text that we've been enjoying and I hope delving into in depth, Proverbs. We're not at chapter 16 yet, but that verse is from Proverbs 16, verse 32. Thinking a lot about strength. Moses has reached the end of his life. He is quite literally in his final days. And yet, as we will know from the very end of the Torah, his sight was undimmed and his vigor was unabated. Such a magnificent notion of someone in their fullness of years still being able, if not to see absolutely clearly physically, to have nonetheless a vision of what could yet be. But Moses is very much a human being. And as we read his final speeches, I was moved by the teachings of Rabbi Judy Shanks, who focused my attention on this notion of Moses's gevura. It's a wonderful word to take into your hearts. Gevura, strength, maturity, power, translated in many places. Rabbi Shanks teaches that in his final days, Moses, as he speaks to the people, both exploits and contains his undiminished power, gevura. He implicitly accepts God's decree that Joshua will take the mantle of leadership and lead the Israelites into the land. It takes internal strength, fearlessness, and a reining in of the ego to offer, as Moses does, unvarnished accounts of moments in his own life that were moments of weakness and failures of leadership. Moses begins his historical review not in Pharaoh's palace, where he could have touted his royal upbringing or his closeness to great power, or at the burning bush, where he was singled out for greatness, or on the far shores of the Sea of Reeds, singing that magnificent hymn to the Holy One, leading all of the people in joyous and reverential song. Instead, Moses doesn't account for his greatest moments. He begins his speeches with some of his weakest moments. At the very beginning of Moses' Devarim, his great words in this final book of the Torah, he relates how twice he desperately called out to God to relieve him of the weight of the people, their boundless needs, their quarreling, and their unrealistic expectations. And now, in Deuteronomy 1, verse 12, before our official reading began today, but he said in his depletion, just by the act of remembering, he actually cries out again, sort of in the present tense, how, Eicha, could I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? Moses' unvarnished look at his moments of greatest weakness are a little bit comical. They're so human and they're so raw and they're so honest, but there's such great strength in his ability to touch that part of himself that was the most human. Moses speaks with such great pain of his disappointment at being denied entrance to the land, Perhaps it is that prompts him to speak of the pain the people inflicted upon him. He reveals his own vulnerability and a judgment on the people who pushed him past his breaking point. Who is strong? The one who subdues their passion. Well, we know that that's hardly always possible. Maybe even most of the time it's impossible for us. But as we have said in our Torah studies and so many other discussions, these are aspirational teachings. They are goals. They are visions on this Shabbat of vision that we can and should and must continue to hold in our hearts. With Moses' Devarim, his words, as well as his silence, he seems to forgive himself a little for his mistakes, which we are allowed to do. But he also extends forgiveness and chesed, the other side of Gevurah. They almost always appear together in classical teachings. Chesed, kindness, to those who were standing before him, the ones who had stumbled before and would surely stumble again. He cautions the Israelites against the potential danger to the leader and to the community, the danger of endowing a single person with unchecked authority. Moses reminds the people at the beginning of Deuteronomy to appoint and maintain phalanxes of wise and discerning people as judges who are impartial, whose goal is to bring peaceful resolution to conflict. Deuteronomy 1:13-18. And to share the burden of governance in fair and equitable ways. I'm just going to read one more time Rabbi Judy's wise and pithy teaching. Moses cautions the Israelites against the danger of endowing a single person with unchecked authority. Moses could have begun his great orations with chastisement and scorn heaped upon the children of those who repeatedly provoked his anger and resentment. Such a decision would have come from what we call pure gevurah, fueled only by his ego-driven desire to exonerate himself of guilt and responsibility and to place it on those who had wronged him. Such an approach would probably have alienated many who were listening to him, whether from their own familial loyalty or simply from resentment at his harsh tone. But the book of Deuteronomy is Moses' ethical will, and he considers again and again how each word will be taken and remembered, collectively and individually, by the Israelites and the generations to come. He is given the gift of the opportunity to speak at length, and his blending of gevurah, of power, and chesed, of kindness, are applied in such skillful proportions throughout the entire book of Deuteronomy. Our Torah and our Siddur, the great poets of the liturgy, tell us what is the correct demonstration of gevurah, of power. In every single service that we gather, we have a prayer called gevurot, powers. We sing it all the time, but I'm not sure how often we take a look at it. Our liturgists tell us what it is to be powerful. In the second prayer of the Amidah, called gevurot, it starts, Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye metimata rav lehoshia. It's a little different in the Reform movement, but in conservative and Orthodox, you are powerful, O God, forever. You bring life to the dead. You are abundant in your ability to save. Great is your saving power, another way to translate. And what does our Siddur tell us is the preeminent example of power? Mechalkel chayim bechesed. You sustain the living with kindness. Mechaye metim berachamim rabim. Your great mercy gives life to the dead. It's another sermon about notions of resurrection, but in this line, I always hear the idea of nurturing things that maybe have fallen into disrepair, relationships, gardens, parts of our souls, bringing things back to life that need sustenance. That's powerful. Somech noflim verofei cholim umatir asurim. This is what our tradition says is powerful. You support those who have fallen. You heal the sick, and you free the captive. You keep faith with those who sleep in the dust, meaning we don't forget those who went before us. Mi chamocha ba'al gevurot. Whose power can compare with yours? You are master of life and death and deliverance. The qualities of mercy are embedded with the notion of power. When we can find our own strengths, nurture or bring back to life parts of ourselves that have been allowed to fall dormant, to support those who have fallen without making them feel that they've done something to deserve it. When we extend a hand to heal the sick in whatever way we are capable, and when we work to free those who are enchained. This is what Moses teaches us. This is what the liturgists teach us. And this is our great superpower. Power is not forcing one's beliefs on anyone else. Part of Judaism's strength is that we have not sought to convert people or to threaten them that they are going to hell and damnation if they don't do it our way. Our strength, and we are very human as Moses was, our strength is in our restraint, in our ability to continue to demonstrate chesed even to those who have wronged us, and to harness our great powers for the ultimate good of peace and goodness on earth. Let us take our example from Moses, from the great liturgists, and from all we know to be true. And may we go from strength to strength with chesed, always at the center. Shabbat shalom.